Hey everyone, it's Alison. Welcome to the video. I'm going to be stippling some more of Strength from Within today. And while I do that, I want to talk about doodling as like a way to help learning. A few weeks ago, I was thinking a lot about that. I was thinking about school and stuff. And I actually asked Instagram, like, should I do a video about this? And people said yes, and today's the day. So let's jump right in. So if you know me really well, you'll know that I have a really hard time sitting completely still and just listening to something or watching something. Like when I'm watching a show on TV, I like absolutely have to be like doodling or doing something with my hands. I even tried like crocheting for a while, but doodling is really like, that's my thing. What do I look like when I'm doing this? I don't know. Can you even see what I'm stippling? What if I stand like this? Get my good side. What if I stipple like this? So school, especially if it was like the mandatory classes that you have to take, they're not always that interesting. So to kind of keep myself engaged and make what I was learning interesting to me, I would doodle on my notes, and I would doodle stuff relevant to what like the teacher was saying or stuff that would help me kind of remember what we were learning about, but something that sticks out to me because the teacher didn't. So something that stuck out to me in one of my classes actually was it was AP Government, and my high school teacher would see me doodling, and he just like assumed that I wasn't being a good student and that I wasn't paying attention. He was like, Alison, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm taking notes. And he was like, you're not gonna get anywhere taking notes like that. And that stuck with me because I think just because it may not be the most traditional way to take notes, and it might look like to him it didn't look like good notes. Like I think he was expecting notes to be just words. But that's how I was learning, and I thought it was really rude of him to say that. But I also feel like I proved him wrong, and I have no idea where he is right now, so to him. So the reason that doodling on my notes was really helpful for me was because, like I said, it was a way for me to retain the information and make it memorable for me. So I still recall so much information from like lecture classes in high school or in college that I probably normally would not even care to remember because of the doodles that I did that made me laugh every time I would go refer back to those notes. Like, for example, I had to take a religious studies class, and what I did to make the class interesting for me was whenever something of significance would come up, like something that would obviously be on the exam, like something with a date or something of import, I would make a little doodle about it. And one that stuck out to me was kind of the culture and like where society was at the time when people started to feel that Jesus was the Messiah. I could tell that that was going to be something that would matter later, and it was also interesting enough to me that I felt like it was worth writing down. You know, sometimes you're taking notes and you just know like this is something I'm going to need to write down. So I did a bunch of doodles of it, and they were just little like comic looking doodles, but I still remember everything that I wrote because the doodles were so cute, and it helped me a lot later when I had to study things like that. Because just reading the words, it's kind of dry a lot of the times. Like if you're just copying notes, like on such and such date, so and so did this, and then he died, and that war started, and blah blah blah, or like on this date, photography was invented, and they developed this method for this and that, and so did. Like for me, dates and facts like that, it doesn't stick in my head. And even if I force myself to remember it, like for an upcoming test or something, I don't retain the knowledge. And what is the point of paying tuition to go to school just to memorize something and then have it fall out of your brain later? So I would do little doodles to make it more interesting. So instead of just writing like, on such and such date, this person did that, I would do a little doodle, like just a quick stick figure or something of that person being like, oh, check this out, and then another person being like, whoa, and then I would like write the date underneath, and that would help me later when I'm studying to feel more engaged, and it kind of made it like a little funny for me. And later when I would go take the test, I would be like, oh yeah, that looks familiar to me, I remember the doodle I did. Doodling was also great for me in classes like that because it kept me focused. Like I would be listening and more engaged because I would be thinking like, what's the next thing that I can make a drawing out of? What's the next like fact that I'm gonna hear that I can do a little doodle for? And whenever before I realized how helpful that was for me, I would zone out a lot. Even if it was something that I cared about, just sitting still, my mind would start to wander. I would miss things. And this is also a product of me being a lot younger, like the ages of, 18 to 21 or whatever. Like I was not like the most focused young 20-something. So being in those lecture classes, I would just be like, oh my God, like what am I gonna do after this? Like, how am I supposed to stay awake while this person is just going through dates and dates of like different art history things? So making the decision to just kind of doodle things and then being like, oh, this is helpful for me, let me keep doing it. That really helped me to stay focused and stay engaged and stay awake sometimes. And I'm just really glad that I didn't get discouraged by that high school teacher about my note-taking method, and that I stuck with it and didn't let him convince me that like I was a bad student or a dumb student just because instead of writing words down word for word, I was keeping it interesting for myself and doing a drawing. So I mentioned already briefly earlier, but I want to talk more about how those doodles made studying so much easier. Part of that was because it was easier for me to take in and remember information looking at pictures that I'd drawn versus reading through words. Like, first of all, I felt like for me it was a time saver, because rather than reading this dense outline of information, I could just look at a few pictures and remember like a whole class of information. And I realized that this goes past just like facts or studying. Like when I'm working on a drawing while watching a TV show, for instance, when I look at the part of the drawing later that I worked on, I remember what happened in that episode. I talked about this a little bit on Instagram the other day. I'm working on this other really big drawing, and I watched, since it's like so huge, I've been listening to a lot of TV shows while working on it. And when I look at each section of the drawing, I can remember like exactly what show I was listening to, and like what episodes it was, or if it was a movie, I can remember what scenes were playing while I was doing what lines and how I felt about those scenes. So doodling during these classes ended up being a way more effective study tool than I realized even as I was doodling, because I would go back, even now I can go back and look at like a doodle, even if it's not totally related to what we were learning, and I remember that day. Like I remember sitting in the class making that drawing and listening to the professor talk about whatever the heck. So it's really just such an underrated, underappreciated method of storing information in your brain. So you can probably see in some of the examples that I've put up of my notes, but these weren't like incredible drawings. Like these weren't anything on this level. They were just really like stick figures or like little doodles. Like you would never know looking at them that I was an art student or like an artistic person by any means. That is important to stress because I think doodling, drawing as a form of note-taking will be beneficial whether you're artistic or not. It helped me so much to remember things, and it helped me feel engaged in the class and look forward to the class even, and it helped me care about the class in a way that I wouldn't have. Like, it just helped me feel a lot more involved, especially in those classes where there wasn't a lot of back and forth, like the high school classes where it's a lot of, like that government class where it was mostly just reading and listening and watching, or like in my lecture classes in college where you're not interacting really with the professor, you're just watching them speak and looking at like a PowerPoint or a bunch of slides. Like, the doodles, the drawings helped me stay engaged, feel involved, and helped me feel like I was kind of taking ownership of the information I was learning and processing it in a way that was my own instead of just copying down the words or text from a book or just writing down dates, because I tried that and I would totally lose focus. It was not helpful for me. I knew that this couldn't just be something, like if I'm thinking about how this is an effective learning tool, I know people who actually look into stuff like this professionally must have done something about it. So I looked online and I did find an article saying kind of exactly what I'm saying right now, that drawing is a really effective way to retain information, and they put it in words a lot better than I'm doing. They talked about how because the student is, by drawing, taking the information and then processing it in a way unique to them and putting it on the page in a way that they have thought through instead of just writing it down word for word. By doing that, it helps them remember it more, and it helps them retain that information more, because instead of just hearing plant and writing plant, they're hearing plant, picturing a plant, drawing a plant, and then that involves them more in understanding what a plant is. So I'll link that in the description too, because that was really interesting and really satisfying to read. I was like, oh, I'm right. Like, look, this is a real thing. It's not just me. And they also stressed that, like, this isn't just a process that works for artistic students or for people who feel like they're good at drawing. Like, this should be encouraged for anyone because it's helpful. And the doodles don't have to be amazing. Like, they don't have to be works of art. They just have to be there and memorable for you and recognizable to you. And I do think that besides being more efficient, it really just makes it a lot more fun. Like, it's so much more fun to draw little pictures of funny looking people yelling things at each other than it is to write down so-and-so worked with so-and-so and together they accomplished blah. Like, that's not fun. Like, I still look at some of my notes and like laugh at them. And I think that's awesome. It also creates really pleasant memories of those classes and reminds me of the people that I was friends with at the time, and reminds me of people in general. I don't know, it made those classes more fun to look back on. And life is for living. You want to have as many good memories as you can, and if you can find a way to make your Astronomy 101 class a fun memory instead of just a vague recollection of a lecture hall, doodling your notes is a way to do that. Obviously, stippling is a much slower process when I'm talking while I'm doing it and not just speeding through it, but I hope you enjoyed this video. I thought it was really fun to talk about, and I think it's something important to think about and something to consider if you're learning something new. Like, do a doodle about it. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll talk to you later.